Welcome back. All right, so in November, I did a video where I talked about the Washington Capitals and asked the question about whether it might be time for them to retool or rebuild. I think right now is a good time to revisit this conversation as we're 9 days out from the trade deadline. In the event that this team decides, you know what, we're going to make major changes, they can. And I said this in November and I'm saying it again here. And honestly, there are some guys here that could attract a lot of interest. Look how much guys get at the trade deadline, how many first round picks get traded, and good prospects and whatnot. And the Capitals are a team that needs some good young prospects. So I've got on the board here the years they've had since 07-08. When they came into the playoffs, 94 points. They were first in their division that year. They were first in the division for 4 straight seasons from 07-08 through to 2010-2011. Now that was in the Southeast Division. Eventually, of course, the divisions get changed around. They're in the Metro. It really has not affected their ability to finish first in the division. They were second in 2011-2012. They were first in 2012-2013. They missed the playoffs in 2013-2014, but it was a 90-point season. So it wasn't a terrible season by any stretch, and they bounced back being second the following season and won President's Trophies back-to-back. So they won President's Trophies twice back-to-back in 2009, 2010, and 2010-2011, as well as 2015, 2016, and 2016, 2017. Famously, the year after that, they finished first in their division, and they win the Stanley Cup. They finished first the year after that. They finished first the year after that, second the year after that, and then fourth last season. Right now, they are sitting sixth in the Metro. Now, there's no reason to throw in the towel, and I'm not going to try to suggest that that's what they should do. But if by next Friday this picture stays pretty mediocre for Washington, I think it makes a lot of sense to make moves because you don't want to lose a bunch of guys for nothing. And you also don't want to spend a bunch of money to keep guys around so you don't lose them for nothing. There's also the possibility that they wait until the draft, right? So they miss the playoffs, they wait until the draft and move players. But I just figured before the trade deadline, why not discuss this? So this year they're 28, 25, and 6 for 62 points in 59 games. They're way off their pace from any of the previous seasons, right? This is a team that even looking at the 90-point season when they missed the playoffs, they're off that pace as well. Now, again, the picture is not so dreary that they can't make it. If we look at it right now, the Islanders occupy the first wildcard spot. They've played 60 games. They have 55 points. I've got the wrong number of games there for Washington. I'm fixing it. And now Washington has 1 game in hand on the Islanders, and they're 3 points back. Washington has 1 game in hand on Florida, and they are 2 points back of Florida. So, again, it's a matter of this is a team that's good, not great. There are good teams below the playoff line. I know it throws people off when I say it, but there are. Being below the playoff line in the NHL no longer means that your team isn't any good. It just means you're not in the top 16, which I'm really glad for. This era, I think, is great. It really is. To see good teams missing the playoffs, it is so much more refreshing than what I grew up with as a kid, where really bad teams would make the playoffs. So, to get in, they have to pass Pittsburgh and Detroit. Now, Detroit, they're tied with in points, but they've played 3 more games then, and they've played 3 more games than Pittsburgh as well. So the problem they have is that they have to jump past 3 teams minimum. They don't have games in hand on 2 of them, and they also don't have really a points percentage advantage on very many as well. Buffalo's right beneath them, 60 points in 55 games, so Buffalo has 4 games in hand on them. And Ottawa has 3 games in hand on them and sits 4 points back of Washington. So for the Caps, this is a really big time, and this is where a bold GM could make a big move here. So you've got Ovechkin leading the way in scoring, 54 games, 32 goals, 22 assists, 54 points, 37 years of age. And Ovechkin is still likely going to score 40-plus goals, right? Maybe he doesn't hit 50. Maybe this is one of those years that he doesn't hit 50. It has happened before. It feels like it's been a long time, but he's had seasons where he hasn't hit 50 goals before. And then you've got Kuznetsov. 9 goals, 36 assists, 45 points in 58 games. He's 30 years of age. And I've seen some Caps fans saying, well, time to get rid of Kuznetsov. The one thing with that is, I really think that would severely hamper their depth down the middle. Even though they've kept Strome, Strome's going to be sticking around. He's only 25 years of age. He has 12 goals, 25 assists, 37 points in 58 games. But Backstrom's clearly winding down, and if you move out Kuznetsov, unless you're getting another center back, you're really hurting the team at that point. And yeah, I don't think that happens. I think in all likelihood we may see a rental or two come out of this. Gustafsson, 58 games, 7 goals, 24 assists, 27 assists for 34 points. He's 30 years of age. He's a free agent this summer. In the event they fall out of the hunt between now and next Friday, or even if they don't, do you look at a Gustafsson? Do you just put his name out there? Gustafsson's been scoring at a very good rate. I think his market value would be relatively high if Washington made him available. I don't know how much that handicaps the team after the trade deadline. John Carlson, once he returns, will occupy a lot of the space being taken by Gustafsson right now, right? Then you've got Connor Sherry, 59 games, 12 goals, 18 assists, 30 points. He's 30 years of age. According to Cap Friendly, his contract expires this year as well. So again, if they made Sherry available, there'd be takers. Johansson, 59 games, 13 goals, 15 assists, 28 points, 32 years of age, and he's a UFA this summer as well. So again, you have an opportunity to maybe get back prospects, draft picks. Their prospect line is needing. Because Washington's been this good for this long, their prospect pool is not one of the premier prospect pools in the NHL. And one question you have to ask is, so when Ovechkin is done, and eventually that happens, who takes over? Who becomes the guy in Washington? And I don't know that there's an answer to that right now. And I don't know that there's an easy answer to it either. Then you've got Mantha, 54 games, 9 goals, 15 assists, 24 points. He's 28 years of age. It feels like Mantha's kind of on the outs. He's been a healthy scratch not too long ago. Part of that, though, being they had too many forwards at the time. And so we'll see what happens with Mantha if he's still with the Caps past the deadline. Milano, who's already signed an extension, 46 games, 8 goals, 15 assists, 23 points. He's 26 years of age. And it's nice to see him producing and getting another shot in the NHL after the way the summer went for him. Starting with Anaheim saying, well, we're not going to give him a qualifying offer, making him a free agent. Carlson's only played 30 games, 8 goals, 13 assists, 21 points. He's 33 years of age. And this is part of what happens is your team just gets older. The Caps need to get younger, and they need to get a little faster. They need to be faster on the puck. Maybe there's a hunger differential between themselves and some of the younger players that just can't be made up as easily. Jensen, 59 games, 1 goal, 20 assists, 21 points. He's 32 years of age. He's a free agent this summer as well. So if they decide to make Jensen available, there would be takers. This is really going to be an interesting deadline in that, I look at this and I say, this is a chance to do something bold. Way back in the day, so I didn't have a channel then, there's no proof of it, but way back in the day when the Canucks had the Sedins going to market, I argued to coworkers of mine at the time, I thought they were better off to let the Sedins go and use that cap money elsewhere because I didn't feel like the Canucks were going to be contenders anytime soon. And as much as I loved the Sedins, and I did, and I'm glad they spent their whole careers in Vancouver, I thought it's a really risky move to let them go to market and end up somewhere else. But I thought that for the Canucks at the time, it could be a really smart move. Because then you're saving that, $14, $16 million between the two, and you have that money then to kind of reshape your lineup. What the Capitals can do over this trade deadline, maybe after the season's done, they can really reshape this lineup. And I mean that because I don't think a full rebuild is needed, nor would it work for Ovechkin, right? Because, again, he's 37 years of age. He's not going to be around that much longer. So the idea of, hey, we might have to do a full rebuild, I don't think he'd necessarily be on board with that. Then you got Oshie, 41 games, 11 goals, 9 assists, 20 points. He's 36 years of age. Oshie is injury prone, and it's really been the case with him for years now. He's very good when he's in the lineup. It's a matter of when he's in the lineup, right? Backstrom, he's returned now. He's played 16 games, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. One thing that stands out with Backstrom, he's a -11, and he just doesn't look like himself. Now, he's 35 years of age, and he did have the hip surgery. And as stated, when he had the hip surgery, players normally coming back from this injury are not the same. They're not the same player. So for Backstrom, the offensive numbers aren't great, and that -11 stands out too. That's almost a -1 per game. Then you've got Tom Wilson. Since the return from his injury, 10 games, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points. He's a -9. So the overall numbers with Wilson and Backstrom, well, you've gotten 7 goals out of the two of them. The numbers haven't been fantastic. Backstrom's 35, Wilson's 28. I have very little doubt that Tom Wilson's going to get back to being his usual self. His plus-minus numbers will get better. Backstrom, I do wonder. I do have some concern when it comes to Backstrom about whether or not he's going to be able to get back to being the Nick Backstrom we know, or if this is a new Nick Backstrom because he had to have his hip done, right? So that's a question mark right there. And then to me, there's one disappointment that kind of stands out, and I say this because I liked Connor McMichael's game, but he was pointless in 6 games this year. He's 22 years of age. And in Hershey so far this year, in 36 games, 12 goals, 13 assists, 25 points. So he's not setting the world on fire down in Hershey, and McMichael was one of their better prospects, right? Hendrix Lapierre, his numbers have not been fantastic in Hershey either. Now, I'm not aware of how much ice time they get or how much trust a coach has in them and all this. But again, you want to see McMichael and Lapierre developing at the AHL level and being ready to come in and play a top 6 role soon. And I don't know that's going to happen. And as I mentioned, this is what happens when you have a team that's near the top of the standings and you're drafting later in the first round. You're not going to get those surefire picks. You're not going to get the guys who are certain NHLers. People talk a lot about the Rangers and Kakko and Lafreniere. Yeah, but they're NHLers. They're NHL players. And so getting those early draft picks, sure, they may not all turn out to be stars, but they're National Hockey League players. The Capitals need to, I think this year, with the draft being as deep as this one's supposed to be, I think the Capitals need to decide, hey, we want more draft picks this year. So they have the 1st, the 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 7th round picks this year, all their own. Then next year they have a 1st, a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, or a 7th. In the event that they were to go out and get a 3rd round pick this year, that might be advantageous to them. I would also throw out there if they can pick up a 2nd, if they can pick up a 1st, that would be advantageous to them as well. The Capitals do look like they're going to end up missing the playoffs. Now, just if you get down the rabbit hole with me a little bit here, you can get Connor Bedard with a lottery win if you are 11th from the bottom. So the bottom team, all the way up to a team that would be drafting 11th, they're all in the hunt for that number 1 pick. If Washington got that 1 in 1,000, however many chance, and they actually secured Connor Bedard, right? So in that event, I would imagine that everybody would melt down and declare that the NHL is rigged, because no matter who wins the draft lottery, that's going to happen. It's happened in every draft lottery live stream that we've done on this channel. It's kind of, that's just a rite of passage at this point. But if they decide to do the rental market, if Washington decides, you know what, we're going to rent out some guys at the deadline, there's some interesting names here. You have Eller, who's 33. Lars Eller, excellent overall, fantastic forward for them. Not currently in their top 11 scorers. Backstrom and Wilson are not top 11 either. I wanted to have them on the board. But in the event that they made Eller available, you would think that contending teams might line up. Now, there's money issues too, where you might have to retain and use a broker in order to make it all work. But I think Eller would get a lot of interest at the deadline. I think Hathaway would as well. He's 31 years of age. I like Garnet Hathaway. Now, you're not going to get a first for Hathaway, I wouldn't think, unless you get some kind of a bidding war. But again, these are pieces that Washington could replace in the offseason. So if you view this season as lost cause, might seem kind of over the top. So instead of saying lost cause, let's call it unlikely to result in a Stanley Cup championship. And how do you make it so you're more likely to be in a contending spot for one next year? You tool things on the fly. You make those changes, right? So you have Sherry, who's 30 years of age. Johansson's 32. Talked about them here. Obey Kubel, 26. They picked him up on waivers. I don't think there's a market for Obey Kubel, although he's played well enough with Washington. If they decided to keep him around as a depth forward, I wouldn't blame them. Orlov, 31 years of age, a defenseman. And honestly, if they made Orlov available, and again, I know for Caps fans, there might be some horror at the ideas of some of this, but they could get back a lot. This is a team that if they decided, you know what, we're going to sell off unrestricted free agents, and then you save that money for the offseason as well, right? I think this team could be a lot of fun to watch pretty soon. You've got Jensen, who's 32 years of age. Van Riemsdyk's 31. Gustafson's 30. McElrath, who's up currently, is 30. And Irwin's 35. So there's a lot of guys here who are 30 and over who you could move at the deadline. You're not cutting out the heart of the team. You're not trading Ovechkin. You're not trading Wilson. You're not trading Backstrom. Darcy Kemper stays in net. You've still got Charlie Sideburns as the backup. You've still got a decent team here. You've still got John Carlson. You've still got the makings of a decent team. And then you've got the money to remake it if you choose to. According to Cap Friendly, with these guys all having their contracts run out, they would have $17,833,333 in cap space this summer. And that's if we only get the $1 million increase in salary cap. What you can do with that, the way you could remake this team, while at the same time, in between now and then, using some of these players to acquire more draft capital for a team that really needs some good young players coming in. And the more draft picks you have, the better, because it is really like the lottery. The more tickets you buy, the better chance you have to win. I know when I buy 20 lottery tickets, I'm like, I'm still not going to win, but at least I'm not going to win 20 times. But, I mean, it's like the draft record for Vancouver. But at any rate, Washington, I think, would be smart to go out and they don't have to sell all these assets either. I'm not even advocating for selling all the assets. I'm saying if you're the Capitals and you say, okay, we're willing to listen on Orlov, we're willing to listen on Eller, you're going to get offers. And on those two guys alone, you're going to probably get either a prospect, maybe a couple of prospects, probably not a couple of A prospects for them. You might get a prospect and a draft pick. And you're acquiring those future pieces because these guys are going to get older. I remember when the Caps were really, really bad before they got Ovechkin. And that was just bad. Now, some of that was bad drafting, bad trading as well. There were some really strong reasons why the Capitals were that bad. But we're looking at a situation right now where there's a lot of older players on this roster, and if they don't find a way to get younger, we could see a similar crash with the Capitals, where right now they're below the playoff line. It's still possible that they get things rolling. Ovechkin goes on he scores 20 goals over his next 10 games kind of thing. And that can happen. They end up back in the playoffs. The reality is at some point in time, that drop's going to happen. And it could very well happen next year. But if you make these moves now, you can... I'm not going to say you're going to prevent that fall, because I don't know that it does, but it sets you up for the future. And I think the Caps are in a spot right now where they should be looking towards the future, as much as they're still trying to keep this team competitive. So think along the same lines as what the Rangers did. The Rangers decided we're not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. We're going to retool this. We're going to change things around. And they got it done. It was ugly at times, but they got it done. And it did not take that long. It took a lot less time than Arizona's rebuild, Buffalo's rebuild, Vancouver's. We're not rebuilding, but we should be rebuilding. We haven't made the playoffs in almost a decade. And the Rangers did it right. They did it right. They got themselves, Shesterkin comes in. They went out and signed Panarin, and I know the Panarin contract's a lot of money, but they had that money because they committed to the retool. They had that money because they did it right. They went out, they got Fox. And I know Fox was only going to play for the Rangers, but still, good fortune always helps as well. And if the Caps can make this so that maybe a couple of free agents coming out of NCAA say we'd have a chance with the Caps, and then they sign a couple of NCAA guys who can come in and play right away, that can help as well. So if the Capitals do this right, I don't think that they have to be really bad in order to turn this around. I think they just have to make sure they have this cap space this summer and that they use it wisely. And maybe other guys who aren't on expiring contracts get moved in the offseason too, to make even more room to go out and sign a big name. Just like fantasy booking this, just imagine if the Capitals had all kinds of cap space because they decide to do some kind of a soft sell, and then this summer they pick up Pastrnak. So you'd have Ovechkin, and you'd have Pastrnak on the same team. You could have one on the first line, one on the second line. Pasta's been on the second line in Boston all year. It doesn't bother him. So I really and I'm just throwing that out there as an example of the kind of thing that the Capitals could potentially do this summer if they play their cards right. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. What do you think the Capitals should do? Is this a team that's just going to be bad for a while? They've gotten older. Now they're just going to go through this period of being bad. Or can they do the quick retool, as I said? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.